This aircraft, often claimed to be a copy of Boeing's YC-14, short takeoff and landing transport, was the first Antonov jet. It's the AN-72, codenamed by NATO Kola, a replacement for the Antonov turboprop transports. The jet engines were mounted high to avoid foreign objects being thrown into the jet intakes. This was a real danger because the Kola was designed to operate from small unprepared airstrips or surfaces covered with ice and snow. The position of the jets helps the aircraft's short takeoff ability because the jet exhaust can interact with the large wing flaps to increase lift. In 1968, the Lockheed C-5A Galaxy took the title of the world's largest aircraft from the Antonov Antheus. The Galaxy's wingspan was 222 feet. Its maximum takeoff weight, almost 770,000 pounds, was more than 200,000 pounds greater than the Russian Giant. It was much faster and its range was greater. It was unchallenged as the world's largest aircraft for 14 years. The performance of the AN-22 Antheus was disappointing to the Soviet authorities. Its production run was cut short in 1974 and development began on a successor, a jet-powered aircraft larger still than the Lockheed Galaxy. The prototype did not fly until December 1982, but when it eventually took to the air, it assumed the title of the world's largest aircraft. It was designed by the Antonov Bureau, building on what Antonov had learned from the Antheus. It also benefited from American experience with the Galaxy. The fact that the Soviet Union was able to build an aircraft of this size that was more than just a showpiece came as something of a surprise to the West. In the early 80s, Western authorities were not sure of the state of large jet engine development in the Soviet Union. They didn't know whether Soviet turbofan engines were comparable with those of the West in power and fuel economy. This vast aircraft dispelled any doubts. Its 4 giant Lotarev turbofans produced more than 50,000 pounds of thrust each. They made it a very effective performer in the air. On July the 26th, 1985, an AN-124 set 21 official world records. It lifted a payload of more than 377,000 pounds to a height of 35,000 feet. This was 53% greater than the previous record, which had been set by the Galaxy. The first AN-124 seen in the West appeared at the Paris Air Show in 1985. It was named the Ruslan, after the giant Russian hero immortalized by Pushkin. Soviet designers have been very sensitive about the code names applied to their aircraft by NATO. And at times, some NATO names that were considered by the West to be too flattering were changed. They were replaced with something that more accurately reflected the degree of bitterness existing in East-West relations at the time. But in the case of the AN-124, NATO made an appropriate and even generous choice. They named it the Condor, after the world's largest flying bird. The Condor is similar in appearance to the Lockheed Galaxy. The major difference is that the Galaxy has a T-tail arrangement with the tailplane mounted high on top of the fin, and in the Condor, the tail is mounted low on the rear fuselage. The Condor is a great leap in size past the Galaxy. Its wingspan, 240 feet, is almost 20 feet greater. Its maximum takeoff weight exceeds the Galaxy by more than 100,000 pounds. But it's not as fast as the Galaxy, and its range carrying maximum payload is shorter. Soviet accounts of the development of the Condor say that it was relatively trouble-free. Once it entered service, there was little need to make significant changes, either to the structure or the subsystems of the aircraft. By 1986, there were 5 in service. They were being used principally for heavy lift work in Siberia. On one flight, a Condor carried an 80 metric ton turbine into Central Asia. It had to be loaded with a specially built cradle. The Condor started making international airshow appearances in 1985 in Paris. In 1986, it made a non-stop 12-hour flight from Moscow to Abbotsford in British Columbia for an air show there. This aircraft is landing at Farnborough in 1988. One of the great challenges in an aircraft of this size is the design of landing gear and brakes. The Condor's braking system includes protection against overheating that could lead to tire bursts. Small airfoils are placed inside the wheel hubs to draw in cooling air during the aircraft's ground roll. The Condor was developed in the days before perestroika, but even so, help with the design of the landing gear and braking system was sought in the West. Antonov tried to arrange meetings with the European landing gear and brake manufacturer to ask for information about their carbon brakes. The requests were rejected. In the end, the landing gear was a major achievement. There are 24 wheels, and the system is designed so that the aircraft can operate from a variety of substandard surfaces. These include unprepared airfields, hard-packed snow, and ice-covered swampland. But it must take great courage to land an aircraft as heavy as this on ice. The Condor has a crew of 7, plus reserve crew. It can carry up to 88 passengers on the upper deck. It has an advanced fly-by-wire control system. In 1989, the Soviet Union began to offer the AN-124 for charter to international customers who needed access to an aircraft with unusually large lift capacity. This AN-124 is landing in Hamburg, Germany, for a very special mission. It has been hired to carry a 50-year-old aircraft, the Junkers Ju-52, to the United States for a 10-month goodwill tour. The tour is sponsored by the German airline Lufthansa. The Junkers 52 has been disassembled and packed into a large container, ready for loading into the vast cargo hold of the Condor. The main hold is cavernous. It's 118 feet long and 21 feet wide. The whole of this area is floored with titanium to give the strength necessary to support the immense loads it's designed to accommodate. The structure of the hold also uses a large amount of composite material, which gives great strength with less weight than metals. The Condor has 2 enormous openings for access, one at the nose and one under the rear of the fuselage. The rear opening is a combination door and ramp. The aircraft can be loaded from the front and the rear at the same time. It has a crew of 7 with accommodation for reserve crew for long flights. When the Soviet Union offered the Condor for international charter work in 1989, the Antonov Bureau felt that it had an advantage because of the aircraft's enormous load capacity and its ability to operate from surfaces of poor standard. At the time, the AN-124 was far ahead of its rivals as the largest and most powerful aircraft in the world. But Antonov were already testing a development of the AN-124 that would take the concept of giant aircraft another major step forward. The Antonov AN-225 was designed to carry immense loads, either inside its vast cargo hold or mounted on top of the fuselage. One of its most important potential loads was the Soviet space shuttle, the Buran. It could be used to carry the Buran piggyback fashion, in the same way Boeing 747s had been used to carry the American space shuttle, for atmospheric testing and for transport to and from the launch site. The combination of the giant AN-225 and the Buran was shown to the Western world for the first time at the 1989 Paris Air Show. By that time, the first AN-225 had been test flying for 6 months. The Buran was mounted on the back of the AN-225 for the first time in May 1989 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Buran was the name of the Soviet Union's first shuttle orbiter. At the time it flew to the Paris Air Show on the back of the AN-225, Soviet authorities were debating whether 1 or 2 further shuttle orbiters would be built. The Buran made the Soviet Union's first unmanned shuttle test mission in November 1988. Originally, before the AN-225 became available, it was transported on the back of a converted Myashishchev M4 bomber. The Paris Air Show has been used many times to introduce new Soviet aircraft to the West. The AN-225 was the 3rd Soviet holder of the title, the world's largest aircraft, to make its Western debut there. This new giant and the Soviet Union's shuttle attracted tremendous international interest in the 1989 show. Carrying the shuttle orbiter was not the only purpose of the AN-225. It was an all-out effort by the Soviet Union to consolidate its lead in the design and construction of giant transport aircraft. After the Paris Air Show, the AN-225 made a series of trips to increase its international exposure. In August 1989, an AN-225 landed at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska. It was on its way with 2 MiG-29 fighters to the Abbotsford Air Show in Canada. The refueling stop at Elmendorf was the first visit either Soviet aircraft had made to North America. The evolution of this Soviet giant was extraordinary. It flew for the first time just 6 years after the prototype of its predecessor, the AN-124. Actual development time was 3.5 years from the start of work to the prototype's first flight. The speed of its development was only possible because it was based completely on the AN-124. But even though the basic design components were the same, it is a very different aircraft, much bigger, with far greater load capacity. The AN-225's Russian name is Barya, the dream, and by Western standards, it is just that, almost impossibly larger than the largest Western transport aircraft. The AN-225 has the same engines as the AN-124, Lotarev D-18s, but it has 6 of them instead of 4. To accommodate the extra 2 engines, A new central section adding all